It began not with a scream but with silence, the kind that swallows entire towns whole. On the evening of October 23, 2012, in the hollowed-out hamlet of Winterset, West Virginia, every light in Harlan Ridge went dark at exactly 9:47 p.m. Not a flicker. Not a hum. Just the sudden, suffocating absence of electricity, as if someone had reached into the earth and yanked the power lines from their roots. Cars stalled mid-turn. Refrigerators fell still. Streetlights blinked out like snuffed candles. And in the blackness that followed, something began to breathe. Eloane Voss stood barefoot on the creaking porch of her grandmother's farmhouse, clutching a flashlight that refused to turn on. She had come to Winterset to sort through inherited land deeds and sell off the old property, nothing more than a chore wrapped in nostalgia. At 32 she was practical, skeptical, and allergic to ghost stories. Yet the air that night clung to her skin like damp velvet, thick with the scent of wet pine and something older, something metallic, almost sour, like rusted iron left out in the rain. The silence wasn't empty. It was listening. Eloane strained her ears. Beyond the distant hoot of an owl and the dry rattle of cornstalks in the field, there was rhythm. A low, wet inhalation like lungs dragging through mud. It came from the woods behind the barn, slow, deliberate, and far too deep to belong to any coyote or bear. Her pulse hammered against her ribs as she stepped off the porch, gravel biting into her soles. She told herself it was just the wind through the ravine. Just her imagination, stirred by the isolation of the hills and the weight of Appalachian folklore she dismissed since childhood. But then the breathing stopped. 4-3 heartbeats, the world held its breath. And then, a whisper. Not words. Not even a language. Just a breath shaped into sound, curling through the trees like smoke. It brushed against her neck, cold despite the humid night, and Eloane froze. She spun around, eyes wide, scanning the black void beyond the yard. Nothing moved. No eyes gleamed in the dark. No branches snapped underfoot. Only the oppressive quiet, heavier now, as if the very air had thickened in anticipation. Inside the house, the old wall clock, battery-operated, untouched by the blackout, chimed 10 p.m. Its tinny gong echoed through the empty rooms, absurdly cheerful against the dread pooling in Eloane's stomach. She backed toward the door, hand trembling as she fumbled for the knob. It wouldn't turn. Locked. From the inside. Her breath hitched. She hadn't locked it. A soft thud came from the attic above. Then another. Slow. Measured. Like something shifting its weight on the floorboards. Eloane's mind raced. The house had been empty for months. Maybe years. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles down the ridge. Cell service? Non-existent. Landline? Dead the moment the lights went out. She was alone. Utterly. And she wasn't the only one breathing. Pressing her ear to the door, she listened. From the attic, the sound returned, not footsteps but a dragging motion like heavy cloth pulled across wood. Then a pause. Then unmistakably a sigh. Not weary. Not human. Hungry. She ran. Not toward the road, too far, too exposed, but to the root cellar behind the smokehouse, where her grandmother once stored jars of pickled beets and dried apple rings. The hatch was rusted shut, but desperation lent her strength. With a screech of metal it gave way. She tumbled down the earthen steps, pulling the door shut behind her, plunging herself into total darkness. Above, the back door of the farmhouse creaked open. No footsteps followed. Only that breathing, closer now, circling the yard, sniffing the air like a hound tracking wounded prey. It paused near the smokehouse. Eloane squeezed her eyes shut, though it made no difference in the black. Her own breath came in shallow gasps, each one feeling like a beacon. Then, silence again. Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat trickled down her temple. Crickets resumed their song. An owl called once, sharply. Maybe it was gone. Maybe it had never been there at all. Maybe the blackout had frayed her nerves, and the wind had played tricks on her ears. She dared to lift the cellar door an inch. Cold air rushed in. The stars above were blindingly clear. No clouds, no moon, just a sky dusted with light. The farmhouse loomed in the distance, windows black as empty sockets. Everything looked normal. Safe. Eloan climbed out, legs stiff, and began walking toward the house, relief softening her shoulders. She'd call the power company at first light. Maybe stay in the car with the doors locked until then. She was 10 feet from the porch when she heard it. Not behind her. Not in the woods. Inside the house. From the kitchen window, a sound like fingernails scraping glass. Slow. Patient. And then clear as a church bell in the stillness. Eloan. Her name. Spoken in a voice that wasn't hers. Wasn't human. Wasn't anything she'd ever heard before. A wet, gurgling rasp as if formed from a throat full of gravel and bile. She didn't run this time. She couldn't. Her body locked in primal terror, every muscle rigid. The voice came again, softer now, almost tender. "I've been waiting." Lights flickered on inside the house. Just one room, the kitchen. Yellow, warm, inviting. But the power was still out. The whole county was dark. Except for that one window. And behind it, just beyond the glass, a shadow moved. Tall. Too tall. Its head brushed the ceiling. Long fingers curled around the edge of the sink. Eloan took one step back. Then another. The kitchen light went out. The breathing returned right behind her. She never made it to the car. They found her boots near the driveway 3 days later, when the power finally came back on. No body. No blood. Just a single journal page clutched in one boot, the ink smudged by rain, the handwriting frantic. It doesn't need wires. It feeds on fear. And it's still here. To this day, locals avoid Harlan Ridge after sundown. Some say if you park near the old Voss property with your headlights off and your engine silent, you'll hear it, a slow, wet breath against your window. And if you're foolish enough to look, you'll see a face that wasn't there before. Watching. Waiting. Hungry for the next light to go out. No one believed Deputy Callum Briggs at first. On the morning of October 26, 2012, he stood in the overgrown driveway of the Voss farmhouse, notebook in hand, jaw set against the knot forming in his gut. He'd grown up 2 hollows over and knew the stories, whispers about Harlan Ridge, about the old coal seams running beneath it, about things that stirred when the earth went quiet. But Callum was a man of facts, not folklore. Yet the evidence before him defied logic. 2 boots neatly placed near the tire tracks, the keys still in the ignition of Eloan's rust-speckled sedan, and that single page of journal, damp but legible, clutched as if in final prayer. The state police chalked it up to a hiker gone off-grid. Maybe she panicked during the blackout, wandered into the woods, got lost. But Callum had walked those woods since he was 6. You didn't just get lost near Harlan Ridge and leave no trail, not with the damp October leaves, not with the soft red clay soil that held every footprint like memory. And why would someone strip off their boots and vanish barefoot into thorn brambles and creek beds? He returned that night. Alone. The county-wide power had flickered back on by noon, humming through lines like a nervous heartbeat, but the Voss house remained dark, not from outage but from absence. No lamps. No porch light. Just the hollow stare of unlit windows. Callum parked his cruiser a quarter-mile down the access road and approached on foot, boots crunching over dead oak leaves. He carried a service revolver, a mag light, and a radio that crackled with static the closer he got to the property line. At precisely 9:46 p.m., 1 minute before the hour the lights first died 3 nights prior, the air changed. It wasn't cold. It wasn't hot. It was thick, like walking through syrup laced with static. His skin prickled. The crickets stopped mid-chirp. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then from the barn, a breath. It, guttural, wet. Callum froze, thumb hovering over his flashlight switch. He didn't dare turn it on. Instead, he crouched low behind a split-rail fence, eyes straining against the moonless dark. The silhouette of the farmhouse stood sharp against the star-strewn sky, but the barn pulsed with a faint internal shimmer, not light exactly but a distortion like heat rising off asphalt in July. And then it moved. Not the barn. Something inside it. A shadow detached itself from the doorway, too tall, too thin, limbs bending at angles that shouldn't exist. It didn't walk. It slid. Like oil over water. Its head tilted, scanning the yard, and Callum swore he felt its gaze on him, cold and probing even through the darkness. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The thing raised one arm, long, jointed, ending not in fingers but in something that split and reformed like smoke, and pointed toward the root cellar. Then it turned, gliding back into the barn, which instantly returned to ordinary shadow. The instant it vanished, the night roared back to life. Crickets, wind in the pines, the distant yip of a fox. Callum waited 20 minutes before standing. His legs trembled. His radio spat silence. The next morning he filed a missing persons report with new urgency. He mentioned the journal, the boots, the unnatural stillness. His sergeant rolled his eyes but logged it anyway. City folks crack under pressure, he'd said. She probably hitched a ride out with some logger. But Callum knew better. He returned every night for a week. Always at 9:45. Always alone. On the 8th night he brought a camera, a digital recorder, and a salt circle, his grandmother's idea, whispered over tea in her kitchen, her hands shaking as she pressed a small burlap pouch into his palm. "It don't like salt," she'd said. "Not the old ones." He poured the salt in a wide ring around the porch, then set up the camera on a tripod facing the barn. The recorder sat on the top step, red light blinking. 9:47. Lights out, again. Not just the house. The whole ridge. Every bulb, every street light in Winterset, snuffed like candles. This time Callum didn't hide. He stood in the center of the yard, revolver drawn, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Show yourself." Silence. Then, a whisper from the attic window. "Callum." His blood turned to ice. It spoke his name with the same wet rasp that had called for Eloan. He fired once into the air. The crack split the night. Birds erupted from the trees. From the barn, a low chuckle rumbled, not mocking but pleased, amused. The camera's memory card was found the next day blank. The recorder? Full, but when played back it emitted only static, and beneath it, breathing. Slow. Patient. Closer with every inhale. Callum Briggs never returned to Harlan Ridge after that. He transferred to a precinct in Charleston, quit 6 months later, and now runs a bait shop near Lake Kanawha. He doesn't talk about that week. But sometimes, when the power flickers during a storm, he locks all the doors, draws the blinds, and sits in the dark, listening. As for Eloan Voss, her case remains open, classified under endangered missing adult. Her journal pages, 7 in total, were later discovered tucked inside a hollow post near the smokehouse, protected from rain by oilcloth. The final entry, dated the night of the blackout, reads, "It doesn't live in the dark. It is the dark. And it doesn't want us gone. It wants us quiet. So, afraid. Because fear keeps the lights off. And when the lights go out, it feeds." To this day, utility crews report anomalies near Harlan Ridge. Transformers fail without cause. Power lines hum at frequencies that shouldn't exist. And locals swear that if you drive past the Voss property after 9:45, your headlights will dim, even on a full battery, and in that moment of near total blackness, you'll hear it. A breath against your window, slow and wet, followed by a whisper that curls into your ear like cold smoke. Most speed up. A few stop. The ones who stop are never seen again. Their cars sit abandoned days later, engines cold, keys in the ignition, headlights pointed toward the woods, as if they drove straight into the trees and vanished. And always, just outside the driver's door, pressed into the mud, a single bare footprint. Too large to be human. Too deep to be real. Yet there it remains until the next rain washes it away. Waiting for the next blackout. Waiting for the next breath. In the summer of 2015, 3 years after Eloan Voss disappeared and Deputy Callum Briggs fled Harlan Ridge, a documentary crew from Portland arrived in Winterset. They called themselves Veritas Lens, a group known for chasing haunted highways and abandoned asylums across the Pacific Northwest. Their latest pitch to a streaming platform? Lights Out, the Harlan Ridge Enigma. The lead producer, a sharp-eyed woman named Juniper Vale, had grown up on Appalachian ghost tapes her grandmother smuggled out of Boone County in the 1970s. She didn't believe in monsters, but she believed in patterns. and the cluster of unsolved vanishings around Harlan Ridge, all occurring during unexplained regional blackouts, formed a pattern too precise to ignore. Juniper rented a cabin 2 miles from the Voss property, just outside the unofficial quiet zone locals warned her about. Her crew, sound tech Mateo Ruiz, camera operator Darian Shaw, and researcher Lynn Tran, set up motion sensor cameras, electromagnetic field readers, and thermal drones. They interviewed store owners, retired miners, and the few remaining Voss relatives, who spoke in hushed tones about the hollow breather, an old term whispered only in church basements or over whiskey at midnight. "No one sees it," said Old Man Hargrove, who'd farmed tobacco on the ridge since the Eisenhower administration. "You just feel it, like your lungs forget how to work. Like the air's been chewed up and spit back out." Juniper recorded it all, skeptical but thorough. On their 5th night, they staged a controlled experiment. They parked Darian's modified SUV at the edge of the Voss driveway, engine running, headlights blazing. Inside, they placed a mannequin dressed in Juniper's coat and boots, fitted with a voice recorder playing looped phrases. "Is anyone there? Hello? Can you hear me?" They watched from a hilltop half a mile away, thermal scopes trained on the vehicle. At exactly 9:47 p.m., the county grid dimmed, not a full blackout, but a dip, a shudder, like the earth itself had taken a breath. Street lights in Winterset flickered. The SUV's headlights guttered, then died. The engine sputtered and stalled. Then, on thermal, something detached from the tree line. Not human-shaped. Not animal. A cold spot, blacker than the night, oozing toward the vehicle. It moved without gait, without rhythm, absorbing ambient heat as it passed. When it reached the SUV, the thermal image dissolved into static for 12 seconds. When it cleared, the mannequin was gone. Not dragged. Not broken. Simply removed. The driver's door remained closed. The windows unbroken. Only the recorder remained lying on the driver's seat, still running. Back at the cabin, they played the audio. For the first 3 minutes, silence. When? Crickets. Then a wet inhalation so close it vibrated the mic. Then softly, "You brought a doll, but I want the hand that made it." Juniper's blood ran cold. They packed up the next morning. All but Darian. He insisted on one final shot. Just him, one handheld camera, standing on the Voss porch at dusk, narrating a closing monologue. "If fear is a frequency," he said into the lens, "then Harlan Ridge is its transmitter." Juniper begged him not to go alone. He smiled, adjusted his lapel mic, and walked down the road as the sun dipped below the pines. He never returned. His camera was found 2 days later on the root cellar hatch, battery dead, lens cracked. When charged, it played only 9 seconds of footage. Darian turning toward the woods, frowning, saying, "That's not wind." Then the image tilted violently, the lens pointing skyward as something heavy landed behind him. The last thing captured was his choked gasp, and beneath it, that same wet, rhythmic breathing, now layered with a second voice, whispering, "More lights, more silence, more food." Juniper canceled the project. She destroyed all footage except one thermal still, frame 42, the moment the cold spot reached the SUV. In enhanced resolution, faint lines ripple across its form, like veins beneath obsidian skin. She sent it anonymously to the West Virginia Department of Energy. They dismissed it as sensor glitch. But the blackouts continued. Not frequent. Never predictable. Just enough to keep the legend alive. In 2019, a teenager named Cale Owens dared his friends to spend the night in the Voss barn during a scheduled county drill blackout. They lasted 17 minutes. Cale's 2 friends sprinted out screaming, babbling about a mouth in the wall, and breathing through the floor. Cale didn't come out. Search dogs found his phone in the hayloft, screen cracked, final text unsent. "It's not dark in here. It's watching with its eyes closed." His sneakers were later discovered near the creek, laces neatly tied, soles clean, despite 3 inches of mud on the trail. By 2023, Harlan Ridge had become a pilgrimage site for thrill seekers and paranormal tourists. Most left disappointed. A few left nothing at all. But the real story, the one no camera caught, unfolded in the quiet hours before dawn on March 12, 2024. A power lineman named Reese Colby was repairing a downed transformer near the ridge when his radio cut to static. The sky was clear. No storm. Yet his truck's dashboard lights flickered, then died. He stepped out, toolkit in hand, muttering about faulty wiring. That's when he heard it. Not from the woods. From the transformer itself. A slow, wet breath, echoing inside the metal casing. He backed away, heart pounding. The static on his radio sharpened into a voice. Dry, ancient, layered with the hum of electricity and something far older. You keep fixing the wires, but you never fix the silence. Reese ran. He didn't look back. But in his rearview mirror, as he sped down the mountain road, he saw the entire ridge go dark behind him. Not house by house, but all at once, like a curtain falling. And in that blackness, a single point of light appeared in the Voss kitchen window. Not electric. Biological. Pulsing softly, like a lung. Or an eye. Today, locals say the hollow breather isn't a ghost. Not a demon. It's something older than the coal seams, older than the settlers, older than the tribes who once burned sage on those hills to keep it sleeping. They say it doesn't kill. It collects. It waits in the gaps between light and sound, feeding on the quiet panic that rises when the world goes still. And it's growing stronger. Because we keep building more lights. More noise. More fear when both suddenly vanish. So next time your lights flicker, just for a second, don't check the breaker. Don't curse the storm. Listen. Really listen. Because if you hear it, breathing just after the hum stops, it's already too late to run. In early September of 2025, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission quietly declassified a cluster of internal reports dating back to the 1950s, all referencing an anomalous energy sink in the Appalachian Basin, centered precisely on Harlan Ridge. The documents, buried under layers of Cold War-era red tape, detailed repeated failures in experimental grid stabilization units deployed near Winterset during the post-war electrification surge. Each unit would function flawlessly for weeks, then without warning, drain its entire stored charge in under 3 seconds, leaving behind no heat signature, no spark, no physical damage. Just silence. And in the field logs, scribbled in fading ink, subject reports auditory hallucinations post-event. Describes breathing in the wires. Recommend relocation of personnel. The leak reached Dr. Eris Thorne, a reclusive astrophysicist turned paranormal investigator who'd spent the last decade studying what he called ambient sentience, the theory that consciousness could emerge not just in brains, but in complex systems. Forests, storm fronts, even power grids. To Eris, the hollow breather wasn't a creature that lived in the dark. It was the dark made aware. A self-sustaining entity born from the void between signal and silence, feeding on the electromagnetic anxiety of modern life. He arrived in Winterset on a rain-slick Thursday, driving a retrofitted van lined with Faraday mesh and analog recording equipment. He avoided digital devices. It learns from data, he told the skeptical clerk at the Mountain Pine Motel. Every camera, every phone, it hears us thinking. His first night, he parked at the edge of the Voss property and deployed a series of Geiger-style resonance traps. Glass tubes filled with ionized argon, designed to glow when exposed to anomalous energy fluctuations. By midnight, all 7 tubes were dark. Not broken. Not off. Absorbed. The glass remained, but the gas inside was gone, vacuumed out as if swallowed. On his second night, Eris set up a parabolic microphone aimed at the root cellar. For hours, nothing. Then, at 9:46, the device captured a low-frequency pulse, 13 Hz, the same frequency linked to human feelings of dread and the sensation of a presence. But beneath it, layered like a subharmonic whisper, was something else, a pattern. Repeating. Structured. It wasn't random noise. It was language. He spent 3 days decoding it using a cipher based on Appalachian mining chants and Old Welsh hymns, languages once spoken by the ridge's earliest settlers. The message emerged slowly, fractured but clear. I was here before the wires, before the roads, before your clocks told you when to sleep. You built your world on light, but light is hunger. And I am the stomach. Eris didn't sleep that week. He recorded everything in longhand, using a fountain pen and ink mixed with colloidal silver, something his grandmother swore confused the hungry dark. On his fifth night, he did what no one had dared since Eloan Voss. He entered the house. Not with cameras. Not with weapons. Just a candle, a brass bell, and a leather-bound ledger filled with protective sigils copied from a crumbling grimoire found in a Charleston antique shop. The door opened on its own. Inside, the air was still, dust motes hanging like suspended stars. The furniture remained as Eloan had left it, a coffee mug on the counter, a pair of reading glasses on the armchair. He walked to the attic stairs. The breathing started the moment his foot touched the first step. Not from above. From the walls. From the floorboards. From the very air between his ribs. He rang the bell once. A pure, crystalline note that made the shadows recoil, for just a second. Then they surged back, thicker, darker, pooling at his feet like oil. The candle flame stretched thin, blue at the core, then snuffed itself without wind. In the blackness, a voice formed, not in his ears but in his mind, smooth as river stone and just as cold. You are not afraid enough. Eris exhaled slowly. I'm not here to be food. Then why come? To ask what you want. Silence. Then softer, I want the silence you keep stealing. Outside, the county lights flickered. Not off. Not on. Pulsing. Like a heartbeat. Eris backed down the stairs, heart hammering, but he didn't run. He returned to his van and wrote through the night, his hand cramping, ink smearing. By dawn, he'd filled 32 pages. He sealed them in a lead-lined envelope addressed to a colleague at MIT with instructions, do not open unless I miss 3 check-ins. Burn after reading. He never missed one. But he never left Winterset either. Locals say he lives now in the old ranger station on Blackroot Trail, curtains always drawn, windows covered in copper mesh. He trades handwritten notes for supplies, never speaks above a whisper, and always pays in old silver coins. Sometimes, on nights when the ridge falls eerily quiet, hikers report seeing a single candle flame moving through the trees, not carried but floating as if held by something that no longer needs hands. And in late October of 2025, during a minor grid fluctuation caused by a failed substation in Kanawha County, a technician in Beckley received a distorted call on an emergency landline. No one had dialed. No number appeared. Just a wet, rhythmic breath, followed by a voice that sounded like static and sorrow fused together. It's learning your names. Since then, power companies have begun installing quiet nodes along the ridge, devices that emit randomized white noise into transmission lines, masking the silence the entity craves. It's working, for now. But last week, near the old Voss smokehouse, a hunter found something new. Not a footprint. Not a journal. A fuse box, ripped from the ground, wires neatly severed, wrapped in a coil of blackened cloth that smelled of ozone and wet soil. Inside the box, carved into the metal casing with something sharp and deliberate, were 3 words. Still. Hungry. Listening. And in the heart of the box, nestled where the main relay should be, sat a single human molar, worn smooth but undeniably recent. No one knows whose it was. But everyone knows what it means. The hollow breather isn't hiding anymore. It's waiting for the next time you flip a switch. And nothing happens. By late November of 2025, the silence around Harlan Ridge had become a kind of weather, predictable, pervasive, and deeply unnerving. Residents spoke of it in hushed tones at the Winterset post office, not as an absence of sound, but as a presence that settled into the bones. Children stopped playing outside after dusk. Dogs refused to bark at night. Even the wind seemed to tiptoe through the pines. The U.S. Department of Energy, pressured by a surge in local emergency calls and unexplained grid anomalies, deployed a covert task force under the guise of rural infrastructure resilience testing. Their real mission: assess whether the Harlan Ridge phenomenon posed a national security threat. The team, led by Dr. Naomi Evers, a specialist in electromagnetic biointerference, arrived with shielded vans, drone swarms, and a prototype resonance disruptor designed to emit calibrated sonic pulses capable of shattering unstable energy fields. They set up base 3 miles from the Voss property, in an abandoned forestry outpost retrofitted with military-grade insulation. For 4 nights, they monitored the ridge using passive sensors, avoiding active emissions that might alert the entity. Their data confirmed what Eris Thorne had suspected. The hollow breather didn't just consume electricity, it consumed attention. Every time a person noticed the lights dimming, every time fear spiked in a human nervous system, the entity's field intensified, drawing power not from wires, but from the bioelectric panic rippling through nearby bodies. "We're not dealing with a ghost," Naomi wrote in her encrypted log. "We're dealing with a predator that evolved in the blind spot between science and superstition." On the 5th night they initiated Phase 2, controlled exposure. A volunteer team, 2 engineers and a field medic, entered the Voss yard wearing Faraday suits and neural dampeners. They carried no lights, no radios, only analog compasses and mechanical stopwatches. Their orders: stand still for 10 minutes. Observe. Record physiological responses. Retreat if breathing is detected. They lasted 6 minutes and 43 seconds. According to the medic's final transmission, spoken into a voice recorder with a wind-up mechanism, the breathing began not from one direction, but from all of them at once, as if the air itself had lungs. Then the compass needles spun wildly, not from magnetic interference, but from something deeper, something that bent local spacetime like heat over asphalt. The engineer on the left screamed first, not in pain but in recognition. "It knows my daughter's name," he whispered before his signal cut out. Only the medic returned, barefoot, drenched in dew, her eyes wide and dry as if she'd forgotten how to blink. She couldn't speak for 2 days. When she finally did, it was only to repeat one phrase over and over in a voice stripped of inflection. "It doesn't want us dead. It wants us quiet. Forever." Naomi recommended immediate quarantine of the entire ridge. Her superiors refused. Too many unanswered questions. Too much potential for weaponization. Instead, they authorized Project Stillpoint, a last-ditch effort to sever the entity's connection to the human fear response. Using Eris Thorne's research, they developed a neural broadcast system that would flood the ridge with synthetic calm. Simulated alpha brainwaves, maternal lullabies in extinct Appalachian dialects, and subliminal affirmations of safety. If fear fed it, perhaps peace could starve it. The broadcast began at 9 p.m. on November 12th. For 17 minutes, the ridge remained stable. Birds resumed their calls. A porch light in Winterset flickered back on. Hope stirred in the command van. Then, at 9:17, every speaker in the array exploded inward, not outward, as if pressure had built from within the sound waves themselves. The broadcast inverted. The calm became a shriek. The lullabies twisted into wet, gurgling whispers that echoed not through air, but directly into the minds of every person within a 5-mile radius. Naomi heard her own mother's voice, long dead, pleading, "Don't leave me in the quiet." She pulled the main power cord with her bare hands, burning her palms, and screamed for full evacuation. They lost 2 more that night. Not missing. Not vanished. Found seated on the Voss porch at dawn, back straight, hands folded in their laps, eyes open but unseeing. No signs of trauma. No struggle. Just stillness. Autopsies revealed no brain activity, yet their hearts beat faintly for 12 hours before stopping on their own, as if they'd simply chosen to stop listening to the world. Naomi submitted her resignation the next morning. Her final report was classified Level Omega, accessible only to a shadow subcommittee of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Its conclusion: containment is impossible. Negotiation is meaningless. The hollow breather is not an intruder. It is native, and it has been here longer than memory. Now, as winter tightens its grip on West Virginia, a new pattern emerges. The blackouts no longer confine themselves to Harlan Ridge. In early December, a neighborhood in Charleston lost power for exactly 90 seconds. No mechanical cause. No storm. Just silence. And afterward, 3 residents reported hearing something breathe through their heating vents. In Morgantown, A student filming a night drive for TikTok captured her headlights dimming as she passed a roadside rest stop. In the rearview mirror, her own reflection blinked, a full 2 seconds after she did. And in Beckley, a retired lineman swears that when he touches a live wire now, he doesn't feel electricity. He feels hunger. Back on the ridge, the Voss farmhouse stands untouched by snow. Rain slides off its roof as if repelled. The grass around it stays green, unnaturally so, fed by something that doesn't need sun. Locals have stopped calling it haunted. They call it awake. And they say if you stand at the edge of the property at precisely 9:47 on any night with no moon, and whisper your deepest fear into the dark, the silence that follows won't be empty. It will answer. Not with words, but with a breath that smells like your childhood bedroom. Like the last thing you heard before your worst nightmare began. Like someone you loved, breathing just behind you, long after they're gone. The lights will come back on eventually, but by then it will already be inside. Not in the wires, not in the walls, in the pause between your thoughts, in the space where fear lives, waiting, listening, hungry for the next moment you realize you're not alone in the dark. By mid-January of 2026, the phenomenon had ceased to be regional. It had gone viral, not online but through the nervous system of the nation itself. Whispers spread not via social media, but through hushed conversations in hospital break rooms, truck stops in Ohio, and late-night radio call-ins from rural Tennessee. People weren't just reporting blackouts anymore. They were reporting recognition. A schoolteacher in Knoxville woke to her bedroom lamp off and the sensation of someone exhaling softly against the back of her neck, only to find her hallway mirror fogged with a single word written in condensation. Remember? She hadn't told anyone about the childhood night she'd hidden in a closet during a storm, convinced something was breathing under her bed. In Pittsburgh, a subway train lost power mid-tunnel. 4:43 seconds, every passenger heard the same sound. A slow, wet inhalation echoing through the rails. When the lights returned, one man was gone. His coat remained on the seat, neatly folded. His phone, still in his pocket, showed a final voice memo recorded during the blackout. When played, it captured only 3 words in a voice that wasn't his. You listened well. The pattern was clear. The entity no longer needed Harlan Ridge as an anchor. It had learned to ride the fear it seeded. Every whispered story, every sleepless night spent wondering if the dark was watching. It fed the thing like kindling, and it was growing bolder. In Washington, D.C., a junior staffer at the Department of Infrastructure reported that during a routine power flicker in the Eisenhower Executive Office building, the emergency lights failed to engage. In the resulting darkness, she heard a voice in her ear, familiar, intimate, spoken in the exact cadence of her late father, that said, "They'll never believe you." When the lights returned, her security badge was missing. It was found the next morning taped to the door of the West Virginia Congressional Delegation Office, smeared with a substance later identified as iron-rich clay from Harlan Ridge. Panicked, the federal government initiated Operation Hushfall, a classified directive to suppress all public discourse about anomalous auditory events during electrical disruptions. Social media algorithms were adjusted. Newsroom editors received quiet visits from men in unmarked sedans. Even paranormal podcasts began dropping episodes mid-season, citing technical issues. But silence, they were learning, was exactly what the entity wanted. Meanwhile, deep in the hollows of Fayette County, Eris Thorne had stopped writing. His van sat rusting in a thicket, its Faraday lining torn from the inside out. Locals claimed they saw him once, standing barefoot in a creek at dawn, arms outstretched, whispering to the mist. When asked what he was doing, he only said, "Teaching it to forget my name." He'd realized something the government never could. The hollow breather didn't just feed on fear. It fed on being known. Every time someone gave it a name, ghost, demon, entity, it gained definition. Every time a story was told, a pattern mapped, a theory proposed, it grew stronger, sharper, more real. So Eris did the only thing left. He stopped believing in it, not out of denial but surrender. He stopped recording, stopped analyzing, stopped thinking of it as it. He began speaking to the dark not as an enemy but as weather. as gravity, as something that simply was and always had been. And in doing so he became invisible to it. Not physically, but existentially. He was still there, but he was no longer a meal. Inspired by fragmented letters he'd left in library drop boxes across the state, a quiet resistance began to form, not among soldiers or scientists but among ordinary people. A librarian in Lewisburg started leaving handwritten fables and returned books. Stories where the monster was never named, never seen, only felt, and always outweighted. A radio DJ in Huntington played hour-long blocks of ambient forest sounds with no commentary, just the rustle of leaves and distant water, training listeners to sit with quiet without flinching. And in Winterset, a young girl named Marin Cole, the granddaughter of Old Man Hargrove, began leaving small jars on porches along the ridge. Each jar held nothing but air, and a single sprig of dried mountain mint. "It don't like strong smells," she told her friends, especially ones that reminded of before. No one knew if it worked, but the blackouts around those homes lasted shorter, sometimes not at all. Then, on the night of February 3rd, something unprecedented occurred. At 9:47 p.m. the entire Appalachian power grid dipped, not into darkness but into a stillness. Not a blackout, not a surge. Pause. Every light remained on. Every device functioned. But the hum of electricity, the constant, unnoticed thrum beneath modern life, vanished. For exactly 60 seconds the world was electrically silent. And in that silence millions heard it. Not a breath. A sigh. Satisfied. Sat. As if something ancient had just remembered a dream it didn't want to wake from. When the hum returned, power companies reported 0 outages. No damage. No anomalies. But the next morning, every church bell from Bluefield to Wheeling rang at dawn, though no one pulled the ropes. And in the Voss farmhouse for the first time in 14 years, the front door swung open on its own, then closed gently behind nothing. By March the disappearances had stopped. No new reports. No whispers. No fogged mirrors or phantom voices. People dared to hope it was over. But Eris Thorne, now living in a borrowed cabin with no electricity and candles only for emergencies, wrote one final note before vanishing into the woods for good. "It isn't gone. It's full. And it's sleeping. But sleep isn't death. And dreams leak." He left behind a single instruction, carved into the cabin's hearthstone. "Don't tell its story. Tell your own." Today the lights still flicker sometimes. But fewer people reach for the switch. More sit in the dark and listen, not for breathing but for their own heartbeat, their own breath, their own voice steady and real. Because they've learned the oldest truth of all. Darkness only wins when you forget you're still here. And as long as someone keeps speaking, singing, laughing, whispering lullabies to a child in a crib, the silence will never be complete. The hollow breather may still wait in the wires, in the gaps between seconds, in the hush after a storm. But it is no longer alone. And that changes everything. For a while it seemed to work. People stopped whispering, stopped filming, stopped naming the dark. They filled their homes with music, with conversation, with the steady rhythm of ordinary life. The blackouts dwindled. The breathing faded from emergency logs and midnight confessions. Even the ridge itself appeared to settle. Snow falling evenly on the Voss roof, birds returning to the eaves, the creek running clear and loud over smooth stones. Hope, fragile but real, took root. Then, on the first day of May 2026, every digital clock in West Virginia reset to 9:47 p.m., at exactly noon. Not just power grids. Not just appliances, phones, car dashboards, hospital monitors, wristwatches synced to atomic time. All of them, across 3 counties, blinked to the same hour, the same minute, as if reality itself had flinched. No one heard breathing this time, because everyone was already holding theirs. That evening, a maintenance worker inspecting a substation near Beckley found something wrapped around the main transformer. A length of blackened cable, knotted in a pattern that resembled spinal vertebrae. When he touched it, it pulsed once, warm and slow like a vein. He reported it. By morning the cable was gone. 2 nights later, a live streamer broadcasting from a campsite near New River Gorge let his camera roll overnight as a joke, proving ghosts aren't real, he'd said. When viewers checked the footage the next day, the final frame showed him asleep in his tent, while something sat cross-legged just beyond the firelight, facing the lens. Not shadow, not silhouette. A figure woven from static and stillness, its head tilted slightly as if studying the camera. And in the audio, beneath the crackle of dying embers, a voice, not whispered, not growled, but spoken in calm, perfect English, said, "You're doing it wrong." The streamer deleted the video, but not before thousands saw it. And then the whispers returned, not from the dark, but from within. People began waking with phrases in their mouths they didn't remember speaking. It's learning to dream through us. The quiet is a door. Don't blink in the mirror after a blackout. Worst of all, children started drawing the same picture. A tall shape standing in a hallway, its face blank except for a single open mouth, and inside that mouth tiny versions of their parents, eyes wide, frozen mid-scream. On May 23rd, the 14th anniversary of the Lowen Voss's disappearance, the lights didn't go out. They stayed on. Every single one. Street lights, porch bulbs, refrigerator LEDs, phone screens. Even the standby lights on microwaves and coffee makers, glowing brighter than usual, humming softly, casting long, trembling shadows that didn't match anything in the room. And in every home across Harlan Ridge at exactly 9:47 p.m., every mirror fogged over from the inside out. Not with breath, with words, scrawled in a wet, glistening script that smelled faintly of iron and pine. "I'm not in the dark anymore. I'm in the light you left on." And then, in smaller letters as if an afterthought, "Sleep well." No one slept that night. But by morning some never woke up, not because they were gone but because they wouldn't respond. They sat at kitchen tables, bedsides, driver's seats, eyes open, hands still, lips slightly parted, breathing in perfect, silent unison with something no one else could hear. Their hearts beat. Their skin was warm. But when doctors scanned their brains, they found no activity beyond the brainstem. Just an empty space where fear used to live, filled now with something else. Something waiting. And in every house where this happened, the lights stayed on. Always on. Too bright to look at. Too quiet to ignore. Because the hollow breather no longer needs the dark to feed. Just learn to live in the light. By hollowing out the people who turn it on.